Upon us. So this morning, I'm not going to tell you what I'm talking about, but I'm going to give you clues. And I want to see if you can figure out what I am talking about by listening to these clues. But please hold your guesses until I ask. So some people call it a feeling. Others say, it just came to me. My friend Dana calls it a hunch. I've heard others say, I felt an inner urging. At times I've heard some people say, I had a feeling in my gut. I sometimes call it my God voice. So what do you think I'm talking about? Let me hear your guesses.
Intuition.
Intuition, absolutely. I know we have all had those times when a clear idea just comes to us. At first, we may think it's a coincidence, but are there really coincidences? Or have we put an intention out and asked for guidance around a specific situation? And when the answer does come to us, we say, it just came to me, very nonchalantly. So if you're using that phrase, it just came to me, I'd like to ask you, where do you think it came from? And where and how do these wonderful ideas come to us? And have you noticed that they always come at the perfect time? And how about when an idea comes to you that is just so crystal clear? How does that just happen? Well, I'd like to offer you some answers to these questions. I believe when we put clear intentions out into the universe, there's a reaction that takes place, and there's an answer. Even when we have not spoken these thoughts or these intentions out loud to anyone else, there's still a reaction. And I don't think it's a coincidence when a clear solution or an answer or an idea just comes to us. I think it is our inner guidance system, and I'll tell you why I think that. Since we know that God is always with us and supports us at all times, I believe that God is talking to us with our inner guidance, with our intuition, or our God voice, whatever you choose to call it. And I'm sure God has figured out that if he or she or it were to just loudly speak to us, it would kind of freak us out a little bit. So God has implanted in each of us an inner guidance system, an inner energy essence that instills us intuitively with an inner knowing. Now this makes perfect sense to me since God implanted a part of itself right inside each and every one of us. This energy essence is also around us, moves through us, and is us. So when a clear message just comes to us, trust me, it was orchestrated that way. And we really shouldn't be surprised by this knowledge, since the Almighty is always supporting us, and we are never separate. There's a complete unity from God and us, complete unity, no separation. Now in his book, Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes wrote, who was a New Thought philosopher, minister, and author, he wrote, the spirit of man seems to have an external and an internal perception. And the internal perception is through, as you said earlier, intuition. And listen to this from one of his other books, The Creative Mind and Success. If a person always lived near to mind, he would never make any great mistakes. Some seem to have the faculty of always knowing just what is best to do. They always succeed and they avoid making errors. But we can all train ourselves that we can be guided by the supreme mind of the universe. But we can never do this until we believe that we can receive direct from the source of all knowledge. This is done by sitting in the silence and knowing that the Spirit is inwardly directing us. Now, I will be returning back to that passage later in our talk. So how does infinite intelligence let us know what is best to do? Intuition. So I want to share something from my own personal experience about intuition. Something that occurred to me many, many years ago, before I was really as tuned in and aware of intuition. So when our children were young, my husband and I, we lived in a 2-bedroom duplex on the bottom of a house, and we rented that. When our daughter was born, she became the 3rd child, so there was 5 of us living in a 2-bedroom, small apartment, a small bathroom, small kitchen, small living room, 2 small bedrooms. So we knew it was time for us to get a bigger place and to purchase our first home since we were renting this one. So after our daughter was about 6 months old, we started looking for a home for us within our budget, and we looked for months, and we just weren't finding anything. And we started to feel some pressure for our growing family. So after one night of, again, house viewing with our realtor, we decided to put an offer in on a house. Now, I was not particularly fond of this house because it had one of those old octopus heaters in the basement. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it has all those arms. It takes up most of the basement. It has all these arms going out, and it's fueled by oil. So I could smell that oil smell as soon as I walked into the house, and that's not a very pleasant smell that I enjoyed. But we still signed the papers, we signed the contract. We went home afterwards to our apartment, and we discussed it, and we found out that neither one of us was fond of that house. But we just felt that pressure of looking and being responsible parents, finding a place for a growing family. So that night, laying in bed, I had a conversation with God. And I said, God, I don't know what to do. We need a bigger home. We just signed a contract for a house that my husband and I aren't even fond of. I just don't know what to do. I am placing this in your hands. And I went to bed, fell asleep peacefully, knowing God was taking care of it. The next morning was our oldest son's first day of kindergarten. And I was so excited to take our first child to school that morning. And it just so happens they had a tea in the library for the new kindergarten parents. So I went there, talking to some parents, and I expressed my concern that even though our son was in that kindergarten class in that school, that he would have to transfer because of the house we were buying, that we would have to go across the town to a different school. And I was feeling disappointed because the parents that I was meeting at the tea, they were just a group of people I could see that I could relate to. They were very supportive, and I was just saying, how disappointed I was. A woman at the tea named Anne said, last night, one of her neighbors had knocked on her house, asking her, did they know anybody that was in the market for a home? They were selling their home, and they were moving, they were selling their home, and they wanted to sell it without a realtor. Now, this is 30-some years ago when you did that sort of thing. And did they know? Well, Anne said she didn't know anybody that was in a market for that house, for a house. But she did continue on saying, this house is in such great shape. She told me the price, it was perfectly in our price range, how well this couple maintained their home. As soon as she was talking about that, my thoughts went, as everyone else is talking, my own personal thoughts were, why did you sign the papers for that house? What were you thinking? What a bad mistake that was. But when my thoughts came back to the conversation, Anne said, I really encourage you to go and look at that home. And I had a feeling within me that said, you really should go look at that home because there isn't anything to lose just by looking. But I felt very uncomfortable at the same time because this was 9:30 in the morning and I was going to be knocking on a stranger's home that I didn't know. But I had that inner urging and I decided to follow through with it. So the house, believe it or not, was right across the street from the school that we were at. So I went across the street with my uncomfortable feeling because something was telling me, do it, just do it. Knocked on the door, and a woman opened up the big solid door, wooden door, opened that up, but kind of hid behind it. There was a glass door. And I told her who I was, why I was there, and she had her blouse and her slip on. She wasn't fully dressed, and she said, "Oh, okay." She said, "I'm getting ready to go to a funeral. If you'll give me a minute, I'll finish getting dressed and I'll come out. I'll show you the house." So she came out, and she opened the door, and I got a view of the house. I got a tour of the house, and I just knew it was the perfect house for our growing family. And I was so interested in the house, and I asked her, "Can I give you a deposit right here, right now?" And she laughed, and she said, "Come back tonight, but yes, come back tonight, and we'll talk about it." So I left there with this huge source of excitement. And I started to realize, this is when I started to realize about intuition. I started to realize that God, less than 12 hours after I had asked for guidance, putting it in God's hands, had placed me in the perfect house that we were to live in, less than 12 hours ago. It only took that amount of time, because that was the house we were meant to live in, not the house across town with the big octopus heater. So this was one of the first realizations that I came to realize about intuition. I had that inner urging to take action even when I was uncomfortable, knocking on a stranger's door. I knew I still had to figure out how to get out of the contract and how to tell our very nice realtor that we had found a house on our own. But as you know, if God leads you to it, he will lead you through it. And that's what I was thinking. Now, as I think about this very important event in my life, buying a house is a big deal. It's one of your biggest purchases you'll ever make. I was so happy that I listened and tuned in to find the house that we are still living in 34 years later. But what if I had heard that inner urging, had that inner urging, but I didn't act on it? What if I had just been discouraged, thinking, "You signed a contract, you can't get out of it, don't even bother looking about it"? What if I thought it was just too late? But, and this is a huge but, I had placed it in God's hands, and I had asked God to show me the way. How was I to know that this was God's plan for us to purchase that house and not the one with the dreaded big heater? I knew it was the plan because everything fell into place easily and effortlessly. And that's another sign that you can know that this is your inner navigation system guiding you. I just had to listen to the one mind through my intuition, and thank God I listened. Oh, to finish the house story. My husband was so surprised when I called him at work early that morning to tell him I found the perfect house for us. He said, "What? I thought you were just taking Kyle to kindergarten. I don't even know what's going on here." And he still tells people to this day, "Watch out when your wife takes your son to school. She might just wind up buying you a house." But here's further proof of why I believe we are directed through intuition. Ernest Holmes writes in Science of Mind, "We should think of our spirit as being some part of the universal spirit and of our minds as open to the divine influx, as any specific knowledge must come from the center of all knowledge. It follows that whenever and wherever the mind of man is open to the divine influx, it will receive instruction directly from the center and source of all." And he continues, "There is no such thing as your mind and my mind and God's mind. There is only one mind which we all live, move, and have our being." End quote. So to me, it makes perfect sense that God would communicate with us by our inner guidance. We're always supported, sustained, and guided. So our lives should have everything going perfectly, right? In our favor all the time, right? We have all the answers, we know exactly what to do all the time, and then, bam, life throws you a curveball, and you're not sure what to do. You ask for guidance, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, And you start to believe that you have not received an answer or any inner guidance. But do not fret or feel as if you are not being directed or listened to, my friends, because I'll tell you why. Let's go back to that passage I said that we were going to return to earlier from Creative Mind and Success on developing intuition. I ended that passage earlier with sitting in the silence and knowing that the Spirit is inwardly directing us. So Holmes continues that passage and says, we should try to feel that our thought is being permeated by the thought of the Spirit. We should expect it, with a capital I, to direct, but should never become discouraged if at once a direct impression is not received. The work is going on, even if it's not seen or even felt. Thought is forming in our mind, and in time will come forth as an idea. When the idea does come, always trust in it, he says, though it may not seem to be quite as we had expected. The first impressions are usually the most direct and the clearest. They are generally direct from the mind of the universe and should be carefully worked out into expression. End of the quote. So let's just take a breath here and just breathe in these words, breathe in this knowing. And while we're taking a breath, I want to tell you an affirmation that I use that reminds me that I always have the divine flow at my disposal. And it's very simple. It's 5 simple words. My affirmation is, I am always divinely guided. Will you say that with me, please? I am always divinely guided. And let's say that one more time. I am always divinely guided. So in summary, when you ask for direction, idea, or guidance, rest assured that it is happening for your highest and best good. Any time in my life that I have asked infinite intelligence for direction, I've always received an answer. Now, it may not have looked like how I thought it was going to look. It may not have come as soon as I would have liked for it to come at times, but I've always received an answer. Just like in the passage that we just heard, it may not look or occur how we think, but I know God knows what is best for us. Little did I know that day that I took my son to kindergarten that I would find our house right across the street on the very same block as his kindergarten class. I didn't know it, but it was all planned for me. And by tuning into my intuition is how it unfolded in me. So how can you use your intuition? 1, ask for guidance. And sometimes you don't even have to ask for guidance. It shows up. Follow your intuition by listening. Just listen to that small voice. Listen to that inner urging. And lastly, take that perfect action to allow the infinite's plan to come to fruition. Because if you ask and you listen, but you don't take the action, it's not going to come to fruition. So now when I hear people say, it just came to me, I wholeheartedly know that it is with a capital I, intuition, your inner guidance. And so it is.
And so it is.